Yes, yes. Welcome everybody to another Spiritual Matters Thursday. I am your host, Dr. Monica Ogando. I'm so excited to be here with you today. Oops, here we go. Device issues. All right, so we're talking today about the secrets that we find inside of the temple walls in Egypt. Some of you have inquired about what is it like to actually go on a secret mystery school tour in Egypt with me. And I'll tell you at the outset that part of it is about meeting yourself where you are. And another part of it is meeting yourself where you want to be. And so that sounds like it's redundant, but it isn't. I'm going to explain what I mean. When you meet yourself where you are, you come face with the pieces of your biography, of your story, the person, the self that you think you have been all your life. You think you have a chronology, a timeline of things that have happened to you, of experiences that you have encountered, of problems you've solved, benchmarks you've crossed, achievements you have under your belt, et cetera, et cetera. And then you meet the living being that has those experiences. There's a difference. You meet the consciousness that magnetized those experiences, that called forth that particular mother and father, that called forth that particular 0 to 7 experience in your childhood, that called forth those core memories and those maybe traumatic events. And traumatic events don't necessarily all have to be bad. Sometimes having a sibling born can be a trauma event, or a pivot, I'll call it, event, because it pivots how you organize your life and in the order of your importance in your world. And so when we come to Egypt, you come to see that this is a universal story. You come to see that it encompasses, that it travels across time, across cultures, across civilizations, that there's a unifying principle that unites all human consciousness. And so when you can see that unifying principle that unites all of human consciousness, you start to investigate, well, what's my part in it? And to ask what's your part in it presupposes a certain level of accountability that perhaps up to that point you had not yet awarded yourself. Sometimes we think accountability is about taking blame or fault for missed opportunities, for regrets, for mistakes, for drop balls, etc. Or an even cleverer level of accountability to own it, not from blame or fault, but just from authorship. From I create my own experiences. Maybe the circumstances are not in my control, but how I respond to those experiences are within my control, and I get to author that. I get to author the way that I live my life. And I get to own and take responsibility for the way that I have up to here lived my life. Morning, Michelle. And so when we come to Egypt, you start to realize there's something bigger that lives inside of you that isn't your individual self. It is a piece of consciousness, just like there's a drop of the ocean, just like there's the entire ocean inside of a drop of the ocean. So too, there is universal consciousness inside of your individual consciousness. And so you begin to connect with the archetypal story of Haru, which when it's being Grecified, sounds like Horus. And Horus is the hero in the story that makes the choice of whether to move forward in his own ascension, in his own mastery, or to be distracted by the lower nature that always pecks at him. And you begin to see that That story is universal because every single Messiah, you've heard me say this in other episodes, I have counted myself 25 messianic characters across civilizations. And in every single one, without exception, there is a temptation, there is a choice point, and there's an ascension. Right? How that ascension happens changes depending on the civilization, but for the most part, it's some sort of sacrifice, giving up the lesser for the greater, and then ascending to your rightful throne. So when you come to me, with me to Egypt, the conversation isn't about what I am here to teach you. The conversation is about what I am helping you to uncover about yourself. You are doing all the teaching. You are doing all the uncovering. You are doing all of the processing for your own life and for your own consciousness. And it's also the reason why some people come back time after time to Egypt, because who you are when you come is a different person. It's a different way of being. It's a different consciousness, right? And so, um, one of the ways in which we process that whole journey is by going temple by temple, and each temple signifying one of your chakras. And we start with the temple of Abu Simbel. Abu Simbel is at the root, representing the root chakra, and it is huge. It is awe-inspiring. It also is one of the dual temples, because there's a temple that signifies the king, and there's a temple that signifies the queen. And that speaks to how, from the very beginning, we have a dual nature, not only dual in terms of higher and lower, but also in terms of right and left hemisphere, masculine and feminine energies. They are in step, going through each step of the process, because it requires you to understand that you are a multifaceted being. Yeah. So when you have seen that in yourself, when you have seen that duality in yourself, it is very tempting to have it be, to make a judgment of it. This is good, this is bad, this is less desirable, this is more desirable, etc., etc. And what I'm going to propose to you is, what if everything is designed to serve you? What if everything is designed for the highest purpose? And even the stuff that you think is quote unquote bad is there to aid you in your ascension. That even that is there to support you in moving forward. I think of the villains in most of the stories that we have. Like with the Lion King, the enemy was who? Who was the adversary? Who was the bad guy in the Lion King? Somebody put it in the chat. Who's the bad guy? Yeah. What was his name? Yes, yes. What was his name? Scar. That's right. That's right. So then when you start thinking about, what did Scar want? Scar wanted the throne, right? He thought that he was supposed to be the king. And he was, sold a bag of goods because he's supposed to be the rightful king now that Mustafa was dead. And here comes this interloper, little kid who doesn't know what he's talking about. In The Matrix, who was the adversary? Who was the bad guy in The Matrix? Somebody tell me in the chat. Yeah, the agents. The computers, the Matrix itself was the bad guy, right? Right. And so you have this idea that there's something out there that is here to vanquish me, right? We have this adversarial situation. And so I want you to notice, though, that there are some lessons that the hero of the story could not learn without the villain. Take, for example, Star Wars. Luke Skywalker could only learn so much from Obi-Wan Kenobi or from Yoda. The rest he had to learn from Darth Vader. The rest he had to master by confronting Darth Vader. Same thing in the Matrix. There's only so much. There's only so much that Morpheus could teach Neo. The rest he had to learn by facing the agents. The rest he had to learn by fighting the Matrix, confronting Agent Smith, right? And so in the same way, the villain isn't there to vanquish you. The villain in the story is there to equip you, to grow you up, to teach you things that only you confronting your own grit, your own weaknesses, your own limited beliefs, your own lack of faith or trust. If you notice, in all of these stories, Darth Vader, Scar, Agent Smith, all the bad guys had a conviction about where they stood. And they were willing to give up anything and everything, including their own lives, for the sake of that to which they were committed. And the hero didn't have that level of faith. The hero didn't have that level of resolve. He only developed that level of resolve when he confronted the villain, because he had to match grit. Right? And so, in the same way, when you are facing your villains, that villain isn't there to vanquish you. It isn't there to defeat you. It's there to grow you up. Do you have the kind of faith that it takes to overcome this thing that you have put forth in your journey? Because this is the curriculum that you have chosen. The Course in Miracles says, if you knew who walks beside you on this path that you have chosen, you would never experience fear. And so I submit to you that the journey of going from the lowest of temples in Egypt to the Great Pyramid, which is a sense of celebration, graduation, is the same journey that you are doing throughout your life, where you are growing yourself up from a survival conversation, from a people-pleasing or a relational conversation, to one of significance and of contribution and of what is my greater purpose in the world? What is my connection to the greater good? Some people never get to that question. But I venture to say that everybody who's here in the Daily Huddle community, that is something that drives you. That is something that makes you stand up straighter in your chair, in your seat. So, what questions do you have for me in terms of the Egypt journey or the hero's journey and how it relates to you? What's coming up for you as we are talking through this stuff? Tell me. Who's got something?
I think you said it quite clearly, Dr. Argando.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that the circumstances that we encounter in our lives,
Mm-hmm.
everything there is really to move us forward. You know, and you said it in those words. It's nothing that comes to us is ever really to tear us down. It's
Right.
always to build us up. It's
Mm-hmm.
always to move us forward. I don't care how dark it looks, how bleak it looks. It's giving us something that we need in life to move us forward, to quote unquote, for lack of a better word, to perfect us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, good stuff. Now, do you know that, or are you just saying this is what I'm getting from the conversation? Are you
Well,
living that?
you know what? I would be, I wouldn't be being completely honest if I say that I have really learned that, because I have a definition of the word learn, which means
Uh-huh.
that it's not that I've gotten knowledge of it, but it's something that I consistently apply in my life. It's learned, it's a part of me.
Yes.
And and I have hit and misses when I don't remind myself of that education. So right
Yes.
now it's more education, and it's something I'm working on truly learning.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Michelle says, I feel like the hit dog. I'm chickening out on my purpose. I make excuses not to do what I need to do. I'm in a position where I'm being challenged and new opportunities have shown up and I need to seize them now. Yeah, so let's talk about that for a little bit. Let me move this way because I think you can see me better when I have it this way. Because you're not alone in that, Michelle. A lot of us have had to face that in many ways. And I'm going to pose a series of questions that you guys can use as journal prompts in moving through this, and maybe that you'll find them helpful, Michelle, because they were the questions that helped me to understand what was really at stake and what was the price I was paying, what was the payoff I was getting for being where I was. Okay. So the first question that was asked to me was, what are you pretending not to know? What are you pretending not to know? And just kind of like fill in the blank until you run out. I'm pretending not to know that I'm smart. I'm pretending not to know that I have my resources. I'm pretending not to know that I know what I'm doing. I'm pretending not to know that this is going to take work. I'm pretending not to know that it's going to take effort. And just because it takes effort doesn't mean that it's not worth it. I'm pretending not to know how to be a newbie once again. I'm pretending not to know that it's okay to be a newbie. I act like it's beneath me because I'm this age and I shouldn't be a newbie at this age. And so you start telling on yourself to yourself about some of the things that you've some of the beliefs and some of the stereotypes that you have allowed to cement and solidify in your consciousness. So that's question number one. What are you pretending not to know? The second question is, if you were put here to do that thing, whatever that thing is, your purpose, your assignment, your calling, if you were put here to do that thing, how have you tried to usurp the will of God? By saying, no, 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 I'm going to do this other thing. I know I'm supposed to be a teacher, but I'm going to be doing this other thing. I know I'm supposed to be visible and know my power and on my stage and serve as an example for other people, but I'm pretending I'm going to be this humble little invisible thing so that I don't have to actually take the risk of that visibility. Because I want you to know, I want you to notice the arrogance of that position. Some people think that being humble is just so godly. It's so holy. It's so, oh, just so noble and so desirable. But what you're doing is arguing with how God created you. If God created you a particular way and gave you a particular purpose, and you're like, nah, God, I know what you're saying, but I'm going to go do this other thing. How arrogant that you think you know better than the one that created you. And use the will that to usurp the will of the one that created you. Who does that sound like? Mm. And you're over here pretending to be holy about it. But even better, cheeky with it. Right? So that was the second question. You know, if God gave you a purpose, what other purpose could you have other than that one? What did you make up that you would rather do instead? Because when you start speaking about it from that honest perspective, when you start speaking about it from the honest perspective of, I know God put me here to do XYZ, but I am choosing to do ABC. When you speak about it that plainly, you start confronting your own decisions and your own consequences. Now you rescind the right to get mad about the stuff that comes your way because you've set it up this way, based on the choices that you've made, based on the pivots that you've made, because all you're doing is managing your orientation. Am I orienting myself around my purpose, or am I orienting myself around my denial? Yeah. So here's the other thing that I'm going to say. Here's a question that guides me throughout my entire day. I have used it for the rest of my life, and that is, who is speaking? Whenever you say something about yourself, okay, I want you to, all the things that you're saying in the chat, etc., when you're like, oh, I cannot communicate effectively, or I'm too old and it's too late, and I get accolades for my speaking, but I feel like I'm not up to it, et cetera, et cetera. Every time that you use the verb or the pronoun I or me or my, change it to God and see if it still makes sense. God is too old. God can get accolades for speaking, but God isn't feeling up to it. God cannot afford it. God doesn't have enough time. God doesn't know what she's doing. See if it still makes sense, because if it is not worthy of God, it is not worthy of you, given that you were made in the image and likeness of God. And that you continue to insist that you know better is the height of your arrogance. I know I'm stepping on some toes. I'm so sorry. You have 10 of them. There'll be more. Because what are we talking about here? I remember seeing a clip of David Goggins being interviewed, and somebody asked him if he believed in hell. And he said, not in the way that some people think of hell. It's not like this hot place where you go after the life. To me, God, when I die and I meet God, and God is like, here's what you could have done with your life. You could have written these books. You could have changed these people's lives. You could have built a social media following of these many people who are inspired by you and who think that the way to end a prayer is to say, stay hard, because he always ends his things with stay hard. And so, and you didn't. You decided to stay overweight. You decided not to go for the Navy SEALs. You decided to just stay a janitor. You decided to just live this small life. And being confronted with that possibility, David said, was his version of hell. To confront all that he could have been and didn't because he was too, in his words, not mine, too chicken shit to go for it. Right? And I think all of us are faced with that choice. In the Bible, Jesus asked Peter, who do you say that I am? Metaphysically, Jesus represents the Christological character, the Messiah, the hero of the story, and Peter represents the faculty of faith. So at every moment, you as the hero of your own story are asking your own faith faculty, your own self-trust abilities, who do you say that I am? And your self-trust, your faith faculty will always have the same answer that Peter had for Jesus. You are the Son of the living God. Anybody who says any differently isn't speaking the truth of you and isn't operating from their truth, because God sees God everywhere God goes. And so that's why who's speaking is so important, because when you say things like imposter syndrome, well, who would be the imposter? The God in you? Or there's a story in you? The limiting belief in you? Who doesn't have what it takes? The God in you or the limiting belief in you? Because who's speaking? And who are you allowing to speak? Are you speaking from your God self, or are you speaking from your smallness? And why would you entertain that? Now it's time to get curious. Why would you entertain that? Not rhetorically, but from like, get an answer. Because this is you exploring your own consciousness. Why would I entertain that? Oh, because when I act small, then I don't have to own up to responsibility. Oh, because when I pretend like don't know what I'm doing, then people don't have to rely on me. And then I don't have to face the mistakes I've made, or the people that I've disappointed, or the folks that I've let down, or the opportunities that I didn't take, because you can't expect that from me. I'm this little old thing. But if you were to step into your greatness, if you were to step into your bigness, if you were to step into who God called you to be, and that you know that God called you to be, because it's an inkling that won't leave you alone. Do you think that God would call you to a greater purpose and not give you the tools, the mechanisms, the resources, the wherewithal, the faith, the will, the power to move through the very purpose that he assigned in your heart? You think God would put a purpose in your heart and then leave you to the wolves? Is this the God you follow? What are we talking about here? This is what I mean about actually confronting yourself. Like you're gonna have to sit with the assumptions you've made, the conclusions you've jumped to, the limiting beliefs that you have calcified into fact, and decide if you want to continue down that path. Because then you continue down that path consciously and not just by default. Am I talking to somebody today? Who's got something to say about what I'm saying? Talk to me.
I have something.
Yes.
Yeah, I have something because well, what I was going back to is the fact that some villains in your life, the villains come to make you stronger. But well, something happened with me. I would call it the worst thing in my life when I was just 15 years old. And I would say that that situation or that person was a villain. I consider it like death or whatever, the experience. But then I realized that around that age, I was actually thinking that I wanted to be a doctor. But I was actually in my heart really coming, like looking down at the young women around in my neighborhood. And I have this feeling now that I would have become a doctor, but or whatever it is I would have become, but I would have been a really arrogant one. And the coming, like looking down was actually bashed out of me or taken out of me when that experience happened, and a lot of other things that followed it. Because one of the questions I kept asking is, why me and not the others? Like, why this is happening with me and not some other person? Like you, and that question, when I started asking that question, it was nearly killing me. Yes. When I started saying, I am not supposed to go through this. I am not supposed to go through this. I was not that type of person. I'm not that. But then I started realizing that I had lessons to learn.
Yes.
So, and now I feel like if I I am that doctor, but in a whole larger way, like in a more universal way. I mean, may not have been like that medical doctor, that whatever things like that, but I am that physician and metaphysician, and in that way.
Yeah.
So yeah. So this is a great lesson that I've learned.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Beautiful. Who else has something to share?
Okay, good morning. I would like to share.
Yes.
Oh boy, I don't even know. Good morning, Daily Huddle family. I don't even know where to begin, Doc. You have just so many gems, so many nuggets this morning. And I remember hearing somewhere, some podcast I heard, and the speaker said, let's tell yourself, whatever the circumstances in yourself, just say to yourself, I am responsible. And sometimes that's not easy when you're dealing with a situation and you want to point a finger or you can't understand, how am I responsible? How did I create this? But when I don't take that stand, I find myself suffering.
Yeah.
There's just suffering. And when I look back, and even if I can't get clarity around it at the moment, and I say, okay, you know what, I'm responsible. And then I remember I am a co-creator in my experience.
Yes.
So yeah, I am responsible. And oftentimes, as you were saying, there's no real villain because we're all writing the script. And so even now, I'm finding, and I find in relationships, I'm wanting to. I broke my hand 2 days ago, and I'm feeling I'm wanting to get from my I'm telling myself a story that I'm not being supported. and not being supported by my boyfriend, even knowing that he supports in his way, which is not my way, which is not the way I want to be supported. And so I'm saying to myself, I'm taking a victim stance. And I saw that. And when I was able to pull away from it, I realized that the lesson is always going within. Michelle, you have everything you need. Why do you feel you have to take this stance when you know he's loving and kind and this and that? But I keep telling myself this limiting belief that I need this show of affection, love in a certain kind of way. And almost as well, I'm lost without it. And it's so untrue. So I see where I pretend to be in lack, in emotional lack, when it's really not true. I just don't find I move forward and then something happens and I move back almost in this fetal state of mind to think, oh, but he's not showing up this way. Why? I don't know.
This is where you have an opportunity to ask the questions that we posed today in terms of what are you pretending not to know? Who is speaking? And is this aligned with who you know God to be? If you can say it of God, you can say it of yourself. If you cannot say it of God, you cannot say it of yourself. It is not true of God, it is not true of you. And if it's unworthy of God, it's unworthy of you. And so a lot of that conversation, sometimes we get really caught up in this indignant victim mentality of I'm not being treated correctly by this person. The question really is, because the law is lawful, the only thing that can come to you is the thing that comes through you. So if there's something coming at you that feels like it's not yours, ask yourself, where have I given that? Where have I put that out there? Who am I mistreating such that my experience is that I'm being mistreated? Who am I taking for granted? Because maybe somebody doesn't take your word seriously because you don't take your word seriously. Maybe somebody takes you for granted because you've been taking yourself for granted. And so the opportunity is to own up to how you have created that experience so that you can shift. So I'm looking at the time. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here with us today. I so appreciate you. Remember, of course, to love,
appreciate you
of your time, love, energy, attention. Eat more plant-based food, exercise more, laugh more, stress less, sleep at least 7 or 8 hours, and of course, always audit your assumptions. Remember to check yourself before you wreck yourself. We love you. See you next time.
Thank you.
Bye.